So essentially, it's going to expedite the breakdown of the food and the proteins, and like you mentioned, unfolding the food, right? So it's unfolding it so that you can absorb the nutrients from the food at a much more optimal rate, and then it's moving it through into the small intestine quicker. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So the HCL guard, like I said, I don't go without this. It has been a game changer for me, and no food poisoning. I always had food poisoning to the point where my husband would walk in the room and go, "Oh, do you have food poisoning again?" Because it was just a regular thing. And it was so annoying because it just disrupted my gut, caused water retention, constipation, brain fog, no energy. It doesn't feel good. With this, you're talking to a lot of people that are now on acid reflux medication. They think they have too much acid. They're sitting there listening. Okay, that kind of makes sense, but I'm too scared to jump in with HCL Guard and drop my PPIs. First, talk about what the PPIs are doing to their body, and then how would you transition?
Yeah. So a proton pump inhibitor, or even if you're someone who's gobbling Tums, like some sort of baking soda or calcium carbonate product, any sort of acid reliever, all of these things are neutralized. PPIs actually shut off the actual secretion of the acid, and so what this is going to mean is that the pH inside of your stomach is going to be high. It's going to be a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that. That is really high. Studies show that if you're above a 4, then you have up to a 2,000 times increase in LPS dumping into your small intestine every day. What
Wow.
this means is that you will literally be inflamed for the rest of your life. You cannot stop the dumping of LPS unless the acid drops back below a 3, and below a 2 is where the best scores are at. And you do have a defense mechanism in your small intestine to basically grab the LPS and try to detoxify them, but it can't keep up with that kind of rate. And so you will, if you're on a PPI, you're almost guaranteed to have inflammation, low grade chronic inflammation for the duration of the PPI, if not longer. If you look at the black box warnings, PPIs were never intended to be used longer than 8 weeks, and it's because they're associated with all kinds of things. They cause a malabsorption, literally a starvation of nutrients that are necessary for bone health. So think calcium, magnesium, vitamin K2, all these things. So if you stay on a PPI for long enough, you will develop osteoporosis. It's the same thing because you remember the process of getting the nutrients out of the food requires the acid. So if you keep on a PPI, or if you're always trying to take a Tums or something, you're restricting the ability to liberate the vitamin A, the zinc, the magnesium, the calcium, or whatever it is from that organic food or whatever you've bought for food. And so you're going to lose nutrients over time. And if you go long enough, that can develop into actual disease states. You are increasing the level of inflammation and the level of possible infections because, as you said, now you are not killing whatever's on your food. So maybe that's E. coli from the field, maybe who knows what it is, but you're encouraging invasion of yourself and colonization. And then the other thing is that because remember I said that motility is a really, really big deal. It's actually the same thing for constipation and diarrhea. It's a motility disorder. Motility is what keeps the small intestine clean. We want a clean small intestine because, in general, what we should be doing in a small intestine is a lot of assimilation of nutrients. We should be sucking the nutrients out of the food. There's a lot of immune system interplay that's going on in there. We don't want overgrowth. We don't want SIBO or SIFO or Candida growing there. And one of the big ways that they are allowed to grow there is if your motility slows down and you have nutrients and food available because you didn't grab it, because you didn't actually pull it out in the stomach. And so PPIs are linked to a much higher increase in SIBO and other infections in the small intestine, mostly because, again, I believe a principle of the world and a truth of everything is that life wants to live. And if given resources, life will live longer. And if you're going to give resources to yeast and fungi and other bacteria in places you don't want them, don't be mad when they show up there in big numbers.
Right. And I have to add in, these PPIs are connected to low nitric oxide. And if you missed my interview with Dr. Nathan Bryan, make sure you check it out, because low nitric oxide is going to affect your heart health. It's going to affect your erectile dysfunction and so many other things. So we need to get off with these acid reflux medications. So for that person, how should they start with the HCl? And how, for anybody, how do you introduce it? How do you test? I know you have the HCl challenge. What do you recommend?
Okay, well, number one, if you are on chronic long-term anti-inflammatory use, NSAID use, natural and anti-inflammatory drugs, it is recommended that you don't take supplemental HCl without like a very well-trained doctor supervision. The reason why is that long-term usage of NSAIDs thins out your mucosal lining and is it much higher. You have a much higher chance of ulcers. So people on long-term anti-steroidals should not use HCl guard without proper supervision from their doctor. And then if you have an active ulcer or something along those lines, don't use HCl guard. You got to wait until that's officially healed. So for everybody else, again, it falls on a spectrum. Some people that come to us, they've been on a PPI for 20 years. Other people just got on it, because they're stressed out because, something happened with the kids earlier this year. Those are two different scenarios, and they need to be, everybody needs to kind of realize that they're an individual, and you need to be an adult about this. You need to think this through, because on one hand, you have a product that is lowering acid to almost zero. And on the other hand, you're taking a product that is mostly acid. So you do have to think this through. If you're working with an integrative or a functional practitioner of some type, which is what I would recommend to do this bridging, what they will do is create a bridging. So you will slowly step down in your dosage of your PPI, and then you will layer in support for your stomach at the same time. You'll kind of bridge them together such that you transition off one into the other. You can do things during this time, such as take holozymes or take other enzymes, other support products that will make the bridging easier. But this bridging is highly individualized because some people will experience a rebound phenomenon. Basically, if you pull a rubber band way back and then you let go of it, it'll snap really hard. If you've been suppressing your acid for years, when you take off that suppression, sometimes the body reacts with that rubber band snap, and it creates a little too much acid a little too fast. So you got to be ready that this is going to be kind of a this is like going to the gym. Like, this is a long-term commitment to build the right body that's going to protect you and help you age well, help you have the best energy, the best microbiome, the best nutrient status, because there could be bumps and setbacks in this. It's not just a one thing to the next thing, super easy. You may have days of pain, right? You may have setbacks. And so you need to be an adult about this. If you don't have the confidence to do it yourself, I really recommend you work with a provider who can walk you through that. And if your provider tells you no, then fire them and find someone who will, because there's plenty of providers that will help you through that transition.